Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is John Viglotti, and on behalf of OTC Markets, as well as our co-host, Zach Small Cap Research, we're very pleased you joined us for our Life Sciences Investor Forum. Our next presenter is Cognition. Please note you can submit questions for the presenters in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found on the conference platform. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Michael McFadden. He's the Chief Executive Officer, and Lauren D'Angelo, the Chief Operating Officer of Cognition, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol ACOGF and on the CSE under the symbol ACOG. Welcome back, Michael and Lauren.
Thank you so much, and we're really pleased to offer an update on Cognition and some exciting things that are transpiring within the company. This presentation will contain forward-looking statements. Please consult this slide for the implication of those statements. It's available online at alphacognition.com. Now, a bit about Cognition. We're a company focused on neurodegenerative diseases. Our lead compound is alpha 1062. We have formulated this drug to be a best-in-class treatment potential for Alzheimer's disease, specifically mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. This is a very large, almost $6 billion market, but it's characterized today by high drug dissatisfaction, both for providers and patients, and high discontinuation rates for patients and their caregivers who attempt to try the medications available to them today. Our therapy is an oral therapy. It's a tablet uniquely designed to reduce the side effects that exist across this class of drugs and improve long-term patient outcomes. We have announced that our initial entree and commercial opportunity will be long-term care. We'll talk about that today. It's a $2 billion opportunity with future expansion plans to expand to the neurology segment, which is almost an additional $2 billion opportunity. Now, about where the company is in our R&D progress as a company with alpha 1062. We have de-risked the company in that we have completed all clinical trials for alpha 1062. We have filed our NDA with the FDA, and it was accepted in December of last year with an approval date, we call that a PDUFA date, of July 27, 2024. Our commercialization will be targeted for the first quarter of 2025. This will be a revenue-producing company in 2025. Now, we're excited about alpha 1062, one, because it offers significant differences for patients and great opportunity for physicians for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. But number two, if it's approved, it'll be only the second Alzheimer's oral treatment approved in the last decade. It has a long product life. We have patents granted through 2042, and we have filed additional patents that, if approved, will expand the product life to 2044. Our team is very experienced. We have over 20 product launches to our credit and over 25 product approvals, both in the US and around the world. We have an industry-leading commercial team, and we have some of the best industry experience in long-term care. Lauren will talk about that momentarily. Now, a bit about Alzheimer's disease for those who may not be as familiar with the disease. It's a type of dementia. It's characterized by a decline in memory, in thinking, and reasoning. It represents a significant market opportunity as it plagues over 6 million patients in the US. And it's characterized today by high dissatisfaction across all patients, caregivers, and physicians. That's primarily due to adverse events that occur with the drugs that are available and limited efficacy that these drugs deliver over time. In fact, 72% of doctors are dissatisfied with the treatments, mainly due to the side effects. And half of the patients who try a drug in this category will stop that drug in the first 12 months due to adverse events or lack of efficacy. Now, what is alpha 1062 and how can we solve some of those issues? It's a uniquely designed prodrug of galantamine. Galantamine was a drug previously approved by Johnson & Johnson. It was highly efficacious, but it was beset by significant side effects that minimize the treatment opportunity it could offer patients. We formulated Alpha 1062 to be a best-in-class treatment, optimizing dose, minimizing these adverse events that occur with galantamine, and therefore improving the long-term outcomes for patients and their caregivers. How do we do that? We modified the chemical structure by adding a benzoyl ester and a gluconate salt. We additionally added proprietary delivery mechanisms for the asset. It is absorbed into the small intestine. It goes throughout the gut, but it remains highly inactive. And then it's metabolized in the liver where active drug is released into the brain, circulating with about 15% improved bioavailability. Said another way, this is a drug that works where it's supposed to in the brain and doesn't where it's not supposed to in the gut. Now, why do we pick galantamine as our drug, and what does it offer patients and physicians for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease? Number one, it exerts its effect through multiple receptors in the brain. Number two, importantly, it has demonstrated anti-inflammatory effects. Why is that important? Alzheimer's disease is a disease of inflammation. Number three, galantamine has been associated with both improved memory and attention, significantly lower risk of all-cause mortality or death, and it has the strongest effect on cognitive decline of any drug that's available for patients today. So it offers a great opportunity for a more efficacious therapy. If patients can tolerate it, we believe we'll demonstrate that with the data that we have. Now, how does it work in the brain? It affects acetylcholine by inhibiting acetylcholinesterase. Number two, it binds allosterically to the alpha-7 receptor. Now, what does that mean? That receptor is responsible for stimulating the cholinergic pathway, modulating inflammation, and having a downstream effect on other receptors like GABA, serotonin, and dopamine. That's important because it improves memory acquisition, attention, activity, and stabilization of behavior, all areas that Alzheimer's patients suffer from. Now, I'll turn our attention to what data we've generated that allows us to file for approval for our drug. So we took a 505(b)(2) path, an abbreviated path, in concert with the FDA, where we needed to demonstrate that our drug was equivalent to galantamine. And in 3 studies, we did demonstrate the necessary parameters to show our drug was equivalent to galantamine, both in 2 studies versus intermediate release and 1 study versus extended release. And our measurements were AUC and Cmax in all of those studies. What the studies confirmed was that Alpha 1062 is bioequivalent to galantamine. Number 2, minimal adverse events reported in these studies, and this enabled our NDA filing based on agreement that we had with FDA. Now, as you look at the side effect data for Alpha 1062, we show this data looking at Alpha 1062 in the left column versus one of the commonly used agents that's already approved, Razidine or galantamine, and how does the side effect profile for Alpha 1062 compare? In our studies, multiple doses, we have less than 3% side effects that have been seen with Alpha 1062. This is a highly tolerable drug for Alzheimer's patients. Number 2, if you look at Razidine or Razidine pool data, meaning multiple trial, multiple dose data, patients experience 28% side effects up to 45% side effects. So a big difference for Razidine versus Alpha 1062. And we've seen discontinuation rates similar with all other drugs in this class. So we believe any drug coming out with a less than 3% side effect rate will be seen with as a big benefit by doctors for their patients with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. I'll now turn it over to Lauren to talk through how our drug compares to the other drugs in the class and what our commercialization strategy is.
Thanks, Michael. We believe we have a best-in-class treatment option for patients suffering from mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. And what you see on this slide are the 5 key differentiators that set Alpha 1062 apart from what is available today. So as Michael mentioned, first and foremost, these drugs are not tolerable. Alpha 1062 was uniquely designed to bypass the gut and reduce GI side effects. Also, if you take a look at the market, donepezil is the market leader. It's got about 60% of the market share, and it's highly associated with insomnia and sleep disturbances. Galantamine has 0 incidence of insomnia, so we will be able to leverage that in promotion with physicians. As Michael shared, we now have clinical evidence from a study in 40,000 Alzheimer's patients that was published in April of 2021 that shows galantamine has a significant risk reduction in developing severe dementia in patients that go on to progress to severe, and also it demonstrated the strongest effect on cognition. And then as we look at the dual mechanism of action for alpha 1062, this is a highly compelling message for both healthcare providers and caregivers because it automatically infers better efficacy. Now, I know you see a lot of check marks on this slide for alpha 1062 and razidine, which is galantamine. And you might be wondering, well, why wouldn't physicians just write galantamine? It's generic and it's easy to get. The simple answer to that question is you can't tolerate it. We believe that by solving the tolerability issues associated with these medications, we're able to offer a more tolerable, efficacious agent that works differently through its dual MOA. Now let's take a look at the market. Despite the fact that these drugs are not very tolerable and they're not really viewed as efficacious, many of these launches have gone on to achieve blockbuster status. It's a large market. There's 11 million prescriptions dispensed each year, but there's high drug dissatisfaction and high discontinuation rates, mainly due to the side effects. And if you take a look at the top right graph, this is Exelon. It's the least tolerable agent in the class. About a third of the patients throw up. They launched a transdermal patch with the promise of lowering GI adverse events into a generic market. All of the other drugs had gone generic. This drug did $650 million peak sales. And this product was not ideal. You had to switch out the patch every 24 hours. It caused significant skin irritation on the frail elderly skin, and yet it still did $650 million. So there's a huge market here, and it shows us that patients are willing to try anything to find something that works. Now, we're often asked, how is a brand going to perform in a generic market? We love to point investors to Namzaric as an analog because we believe that this provides a base case for sales for any new symptomatic treatment entering the Alzheimer's market. Namzaric was a 505(b)(2) pathway, but it had 0 differentiation versus generic. It was Namenda and Aricept in a fixed dose combination. So their only message was convenience. They also went after a smaller segment of the market, the moderate severe patients, which is about a $3.5 billion market. And despite this, AbbVie promoted the drug for 3 years, and they hit $267 million peak sales in 2018. Now, they stopped promotion, and they have not promoted this drug over the past 6 years, and the drug has continued to deliver greater than $200 million in yearly sales. Today, they have about 75% access, and their retail price is about $667. So we're obviously very bullish for alpha 1062 because we believe we're bringing a differentiated molecule into the marketplace. Now let's talk a little bit about our initial go-to-market commercial footprint, where we plan to focus on the long-term care segment. So this is the highest prescription volume, but it also offers the most favorable market access conditions for 1062. About 65 to 70% of residents in a long-term care facility will have access to alpha 1062 with a 0 copay. We also know that branded medications are used more commonly in the long-term care market. So this signals that physicians treating residents are more willing to try new branded medications to find treatments that work for this elderly, frail population. We also believe that if we establish a leadership presence in the largest segment of the market, which is long-term care, this will set us up nicely as we expand into the neurology segment down the road. So let's take a little bit more of a deeper look at long-term care. So there are about 1.2 million residents living in nursing homes today, and about 70% of those residents have Alzheimer's disease. So it's the leading reason a resident is put in a home, and it's also the leading cause of death in nursing homes. So it's a large underserved market. But we also know there's significant dissatisfaction with current treatment options. As you can imagine, the tolerability issues that we've talked about, the GI side effects, the insomnia, this causes additional burden to the staff, but it also increases risk for residents in these homes. And when we've shared Alpha 1062's product profile with those healthcare providers that are treating residents in the long-term care facilities, 88% are likely to prescribe our drug. Now, up until now, I've talked a lot about the what and the why. So we plan to launch into the long-term care segment because it's the largest prescription volume and it offers the best market access conditions for patients. This slide really represents the why. Now, we believe we are at an advantage versus a lot of other small companies who are transitioning from a clinical stage to a commercial stage company because we have significant commercial experience launching products. Both Michael and I together have launched over 30 products. Many of those drugs have gone on to be blockbuster brands. And when we think about our strategy, we are going to lean into the best-in-class profile for Alpha 1062. We'll highlight the key points of differentiation and exploit the issues that exist today with current treatment options. We plan to build an experienced long-term care sales force, best in class, who has demonstrated success in long-term care. Both Michael and I have been in the long-term care space for many years. We've launched several products into this segment, and we know who those key players are that we need to recruit and retain in order to launch Alpha 1062. We're also going to be very efficient and focused. We're going to target the largest volume nursing homes that specialize in Alzheimer's dementia. And a core piece of our strategy will be to focus on those key Medicare plans to ensure that residents in nursing homes have access to Alpha 1062.
So in summary, you've got a large but highly dissatisfied market. About half of the patients are discontinuing their therapy due to GI side effects or lack of efficacy. Doctors say they're highly incented to try a new drug that offers an improved side effect profile. We offer a clinical de-risk program in that our studies are complete and the FDA has accepted our NDA submission. And we also have significant milestones ahead of us in 2024, including the Alpha 1062 approval mid-year. We follow Alpha 1062 for mild to moderate disease with additional compounds that can be additive to the company's profile and story, including sublingual formulation that we announced earlier this year that offers an opportunity for patients who can't swallow, and then a moderate to severe Alzheimer's combination for patients that are in late stage disease. Additionally, a number of milestones to get excited about for Alpha 1062. We've completed the first, the composition of matter IP filing was completed in February. And then we have the approval forthcoming in Q3. Additionally, new data and an IND submission for a sister company, Alpha 7 Therapeutics, DoD bomb blast study result that will be forthcoming in Q4. I've talked about the team. You can't do it without a great team. I have 34 years of experience in biopharma. This is my 5th startup. Dennis Kay is our Chief Science Officer, 15 years experience in the Alpha 1062 program. You've heard from Lauren, 15 product launches. About half of those have been billion-dollar drugs. And we haven't mentioned Don, but Don's our Chief Financial Officer, Don Kalkofen, both public, private, U.S., non-U.S., pharma, non-pharma experience as a CFO. So he brings highly competent financial acumen to the team. And then our cap structure, if there are questions on that, I'll leave that for the Q&A and close with this. If there's more information needed on the company or any requests, you just forward that request to info@alphacognition.com. And now I'll turn it over to questions.
Okay, so we've got quite a bit of questions coming in from the audience today. I'll take the first one. When will you need to raise more equity capital before getting FDA final approval? So right now, our current capital does get us through approval, but of course, right before or at approval, we plan to bring in additional capital so that we can commercialize the asset, as I shared, into long-term care. Next question. Can alpha 1062 be taken in conjunction with other Alzheimer's drugs such as Leqembi? Yes, absolutely. So I'll help for those who aren't familiar with drugs like Leqembi and Aduhelm. So there's disease-modifying therapies that are coming to market now. They've been in research for 20, 30 years, and you're seeing a couple of approvals as of late. Our drug is a symptomatic treatment. So the disease-modifying therapies such as Leqembi and Aduhelm, they stop the disease where it's at. So they help reduce progression to more severe disease, but they do not address the symptoms that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. And the symptoms are really what bothers the caregivers and the patients, because those are the memory loss. They can't remember where their keys are. They can't remember their family member's name. So symptomatic treatments are the standard of care. And yes, they will absolutely be used in conjunction with these new disease-modifying therapies that are coming to market today. In fact, our thought leaders tell us that no one will stop the symptomatic treatments. The disease modifying will be used very sporadically in those specific patients. But yes, most of the patients that were in the Leqembi trials were on an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, since it is the standard of care. Next question. Would this be taken daily once starting with the drug? Is it something you take forever, or is there an exit possibility? So yes, our drug will be taken daily, as all these drugs are. The acetylcholinesterase inhibitors are taken daily. The goal for these drugs are that they are chronic medications. So if you think about the Alzheimer's patient's journey, typically from diagnosis to death, there's about 8 years. Sometimes it takes longer to get medication, but they are meant to be taken until the patient, unfortunately, dies from the disease. Now, as I shared earlier, the problem is patients can't tolerate a lot of these drugs. So they'll cycle through multiple medications to find something that works. And in most cases, they do eventually fall off treatment. But we have seen data where patients have been on these drugs for 7, 8 years. And if they can tolerate it and continue to get efficacy from the drug, they will stay on these drugs chronically. Of course, with alpha 1062, we believe we've solved the tolerability issue. So we expect patients to stay on our drug as long as they possibly can. When do we plan to move the company listing to the US NASDAQ? So, it's always been in our strategic plan to get to NASDAQ. We believe that that's really how we're going to maximize the value of our asset and get institutional investors into our story. We cannot comment on our specific timing, but as one would assume, sometime our approval is coming up. And so, but again, we can't comment specifically when we plan to uplist. Next question, has there been any lowball offers for alpha 1062? So that's another question I can't really comment to. It's around business development and a lot of the conversations that we've had. What I can say is we're talking to all of the right players, and we believe that 1062 is a differentiated asset and that this market is highly dissatisfied. And we are obviously very close to approval. So we believe this drug's going to be highly successful. So, but again, we'll have those conversations as they come in for the company. Next question. Did you say that initial contact in the long-term care market suggests up to 80% prescription possibilities? So I think I understand this question. What we're saying about the long-term care segment is it is the largest market opportunity. It represents about 36% of the total prescriptions. So you've got about 11 million prescriptions being dispensed per year. That's been very consistent over the last many, many years since these drugs were introduced. And the long-term care market represents 36% of that opportunity. And then if you look at the long-term care segment, 70% have Alzheimer's disease. So you can imagine that there's about 1.2 million patients in homes. You've got 11 million prescriptions, and it's just a significant population. So we expect that we will have access to about 70% of those patients in homes, and that represents about a third of the opportunity, the prescription opportunity. Let's see, next question. What are the plans ex-US? So we do have a lot of interest and are engaged with many companies for ex-US rights. We are talking to every company that we should be talking to, so can't really comment specifically on those conversations, but we'll see how those conversations progress. Let's see. I think we have answered most of these questions so far. So I'll give it a minute to see if any additional questions come in. I'll just say we're getting very, very excited. Obviously, we've been working really hard with the FDA and with our PDUFA date coming in July. I personally am getting really excited about commercialization. We believe that we have the right approach, with a company of our size and the capital that we'll have available to us. And so we're pretty bullish on Alpha 1062 as we get closer to FDA approval. Question, can I speak to the TBI asset? So the TBI asset is, right now, we are continuing to pursue development of that asset. We have actually split that out into a separate private company called Alpha 7 Therapeutics. Alpha Cognition does own a percentage of that company, and there's a licensing agreement between the two companies. We believe that was the right move to bring the right investors into an asset like 1062 intranasal for TBI. And so, if you'd like to get more information on that, please visit the website, alpha7therapeutics.com. We're just kicking that work off. We've been in discussions with the FDA, and we do plan to move that company and that asset forward. Let's see here. So milestones for 2024. Obviously our biggest milestones are, our anticipated FDA product approval in July of this year. So that's something that we're really celebrating. We also had recently in Q1 a composition of IP, matter IP filing, which is pretty significant. It gives us additional years on the asset, and it's obviously going to give us additional coverage for the asset. We will have an IND. We just talked about the TBI asset. We will have an IND submission for cognitive impairment with MTBI through Alpha 7 at the end of this year. And along with that asset, the TBI asset, we do have a DoD grant where they sponsored a bomb blast study, and we expect to get those results in Q4 of this year. So those are really the four key, items or milestones that we expect for 2024. And then, of course, pending approval in July, my team we're going to be preparing, very fast to get out there next year in 2025 for the US launch for 1062. Is there any competition currently or in earlier phase trials? It's interesting when you look at this market, because there have been a lot of drugs that have been tried, new classes of drugs that have failed. It's hard to capture. If you go out and look at the big competitive landscape, you've got 200 assets that are being studied from preclinical up to probably more phase 2 in this space. Right now, there are no near-term human trials for symptomatic treatment of Alzheimer's. So we do expect we'll be the second oral treatment in a decade for the symptomatic treatment of Alzheimer's. And we do not expect any competition in this space anytime soon. And when I say soon, it's not even on our radar. That's how. Most of the research now is focused on disease-modifying therapy. So with Leqembi and Aduhelm's approval, they're still focused on some of the amyloid hypotheses. And again, our drug, we welcome those drugs to the space. One, they'll obviously be good for patients, but two, when you bring those larger companies into the market with these disease-modifying therapy, you're going to increase the share of voice. With increased share of voice, we expect more patients on the disease-modifying therapy, which will also bring more patients to symptomatic treatment because it is expected that they'll be used together. So what we see, when we see these disease-modifying, they're not competition. They're actually going to help alpha 1062 from a promotional perspective. Does alpha 1062 help symptoms or the rate of decline of Alzheimer's disease? So alpha 1062 will be indicated for the symptomatic treatment of Alzheimer's disease. However, as Michael and I shared in today's presentation, there was a study in April of 2021 that was published in the Neurology publication, and that was a 40,000 Alzheimer's patient study, and galantamine, which is our active moiety, actually did reduce the risk for progression to severe disease. Now, we won't have that in our label, but it's certainly out there that due to the dual mechanism of action and just the makeup of galantamine and, of course, our drug, there is data that suggests it does reduce the disease, progression to disease. I think we are all out of time at this point. So I'd ask that if you have additional questions, we do have the one-on-one set up with the conference. So please feel free to set up time. It'll either be Michael or myself to have those one-on-one meetings. And then if you have any additional questions that you can't make one of those meetings, feel free to send us an email to info@alphacognition.com. Really appreciate everybody's questions and engagement. Again, we're really excited about the story.